Today we have some more news from the NHL waiver wire, plus we're taking a look at some trade rumors focusing on teams like the Oilers, the Montreal Canadiens, and the Colorado Avalanche. We'll get into all the latest news coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, we have a variety of news to talk about today. First up, NHL waivers. We saw yesterday a couple more veteran guys were put on the waiver wire. That was David Backes of the Anaheim Ducks and Jack Johnson of the New York Rangers. Now, both players have indeed cleared, so not a huge shocker. Both have somewhat unfavorable contracts, not exactly, players that we expected to be claimed. So, therefore, their teams can now assign them to either the minors or to the taxi squad or whatever they want to do to gain roster flexibility. And there was also not any new players today on waivers, so we won't likely have any waiver news tomorrow regarding players possibly being claimed, but there could, of course, be new players attached to the wire as of tomorrow. So stay tuned for tomorrow's update on that regard. Now, as I mentioned, we have some trade talk. We're heading into the NHL trade deadline just under a month away now, and obviously there's lots of talk, lots of speculation around many teams, especially the Canadian teams, given the fact that any players coming into Canada from the U.S. still have a 14-day quarantine period, which I would, like I mentioned before, I would think that a lot of the Canadian teams might be getting ahead of that, and if they're going to make a move, it's probably going to be sooner than later, unless they trade with each other. Of course, players within Canada are fine to move from one team to the next without having to go through any kind of isolation period. So, starting here with the Montreal Canadiens. Now, of course, we know they lost one of their top defensemen in Ben Chiarot. He's going to be out for 6 to 8 weeks with a broken hand. He had to have surgery. He's going to be out for an extended period of time. That's pretty much going to finish his season. I mean, there's a slim chance he could be back before the end of the regular season, but it's not looking too good for that given where we are in the calendar. So obviously we know that Montreal also has a guy like Victor Mete, who's been mentioned in trade talk numerous times, but right now Montreal basically said that they were not going to be trading him. They basically were looking for an opportunity to play him, and when he's played, I thought he's done all right, but he's still having a difficult time getting into the lineup, and I'm still seeing here that he's likely still not going to have a guaranteed spot even with Chiarot being out. Now, of course, the top 4 minutes that Chiarot normally carries is likely going to go to Romanov. He'll likely be moving up here and taking those top 4 minutes and getting an opportunity to play more, and obviously then guys like Mete should be able to get in the lineup, but it's not a given. I mean, right now it looks like the Xavier Ouellet's going to go in tonight, so I still think there's a good possibility here that Marc Bergevin, now that we know that Chiarot's likely done for the year, likely will be on the market to make some upgrades. We've heard from various NHL insiders different reports that they feel that the Habs are in on different conversations right now, possibly looking to add on the blue line and at the forward position if they're able to make it work. Financially, of course, given the lack of salary cap options that they have to work with here, but with Chiarot being out and on long-term injury reserve, that certainly increases the amount of LTIR relief they can get to make another acquisition. So I know there's some insiders who are saying that they're definitely in on those conversations around Mattias Ekholm in Nashville. The latest 31 Thoughts podcast that came out today, Elliot Friedman mentioned that he's heard some saying that they're in on Ekholm, and he's had others say they're maybe not. So not so much a guarantee that they're really pushing for him, but the likelihood that they do add some sort of veteran presence on the blue line does seem more likely now that we know the extent of Chiarot's injuries, and I do think there's a chance it could be Ekholm, but at the same time, I'm not completely convinced that it would be. Not that he wouldn't be a great fit there, but as I mentioned before with teams, it's not just about now that we're looking at the summertime and the expansion draft as well. In the case of Ekholm, he's not a free agent, like he's not a pure rental, so they'd have him on their books for next year, which is not all bad in a way, but they already have enough defensemen that they would be at risk of losing, so I really don't see them adding a guy like Ekholm personally. I know, just like I said, there's some that feel that they're in on those conversations, but I think it would be more likely that they would go after more of a pending UFA as a rental, because they don't need anybody too long term. But let me know which defenseman you feel the Habs should be targeting, and if they're going to be using that LTIR relief to replace Chiarot here ahead of the playoffs. Now, we have other reports as well indicating that the Colorado Avalanche are apparently looking for some goaltending depth, and that they might be targeting a young goaltender with the Sabres organization and Jonas Johansson. Now, of course, we know the Sabres don't have a ton of goaltending depth, obviously with Hutton and Ullmark. Johansson's had some opportunities this year, but obviously he's not super young, and he does have enough professional experience, and I guess they're willing to possibly take a look at that and take that on. I mean, there's not a lot of goaltenders that would kind of fit that mold. There's obviously a lot of goaltenders out there that could possibly be on the move, but we don't typically see a lot of goaltender movement at the deadline, except these types of situations where they're looking for some added depth. I mean, obviously, with Grubauer being the main guy, Francouz has been injured, and clearly they just want some extra insurance there in case they run into any other additional issues ahead of the playoffs. So it's really just like that insurance policy. But obviously the Avalanche are likely also looking at some other options as well. I do think it's a possibility they will be trying to add another area. But right now the main reports are indicating that the Avalanche looking to upgrade that number 3 goaltending position. Now, as I mentioned as well, we also have some interesting information from NHL insider Scott Burnside, who feels that there's a really good opportunity and a good possibility we might see Taylor Hall return to the Edmonton Oilers. Yes, the Edmonton Oilers. Now, I know when he was a free agent, there was a lot of talk about him maybe heading back to Edmonton. Obviously, it's complicated when it comes to salary cap situation, but the deal that he's proposing would be that the Oilers obtain Hall, who's not having a great season, so the asking price wouldn't be as high as before. If you take a look at what he was able to fetch for the Devils when he was acquired by the Coyotes last time, it wouldn't be anything quite so much. I mean, like I said, his numbers are down. The team's having a bad year. It's going to be selling, a valuable commodity at a low price, basically. But essentially, he feels they can talk the Sabres into taking on the contract of James Neal by adding a sweetener. Now, of course, Neal still has a couple years left on that contract, which you would think the Sabres might already look at their books and say, you know what, we already have enough bad contracts that we don't want another one. I mean, they already have the Jeff Skinner deal, which is looking pretty horrible right now. So, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I guess if they can get enough other benefits out of it, but obviously the sweeteners would be one of their young defensemen that's coming up through the ranks here. They have guys like Philip Broberg. They have Evan Bouchard. Of course, they have Caleb Jones still looking for more of an opportunity as well. And, of course, they still have lots of draft picks they could include as currency too. So, I mean, I guess they feel like between adding multiple picks or prospects as the sweetener part for them to take Neal on would certainly help alleviate everything from the financial side. I mean, it's a great idea if the Sabres would go for it, and I know the Sabres have been a complete mess. So, I just don't know if they would do that. I mean, Hall likely would be a good fit in his return to Edmonton, and if he did return, it doesn't mean he's going to stay. Obviously, to sign him longer term, unless he takes a really cheap contract, which is doubtful, I just don't see how they could likely fit him in too long a term. But although getting James Neal's contract off the books would be an absolutely huge help. But I guess we'll see. Let me know your thoughts on this proposed trade here from Scott Burnside. Do you see the possibility of Taylor Hall returning to Edmonton and Sabres taking on James Neal to help facilitate that trade? I mean, it's a bit of a crazy thought in a way, but I guess we'll see what information he has to see if there's anything to this real possibility. So let me know your thoughts down in the comments, and we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content, and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.